This is Optometrists Building Empires, and I'm your host, Ankit Patel. Each week, we'll explore the journey of multi-practice ownership and leadership in optometry. Join us for insights and strategies from the top minds in our field. This show is sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team helps your office increase revenues, reduce costs, and reduce staffing headaches. Let's build your empire together. Today's guest it is someone that I met recently and I'm excited to talk to today. He's a dedicated optometrist with clinical training across multiple areas, including ocular disease, specialty contact lenses, and pediatrics. He specializes in contact lenses, primary eye care, and pre- and post-operative surgical co-management. He's an active member of the Massachusetts Society of Optometrists and the American Optometric Association. He's the owner optometrist at Back Bay Eye Care with 2 locations. Please welcome Dr. Zach Jost. Zach, welcome.
Hey, Ankit, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. And so let's get into the meat of it. What was the most important thing that helped you grow your optometry empire?
Yeah, so thinking about this, to grow an optometry empire, which I will say I'm sort of maybe in the early process of growing. I have these 2 locations, which I love. But I would say taking chances and risks in my career has kind of gotten me here. I felt like when I first graduated from optometry school, they teach you in school how to become an optometrist, how to see patients, how to diagnose and treat ocular conditions, how to have those tougher conversations with patients and have great conversations with patients. What I didn't find I learned a lot of in optometry school was about the business of optometry, about owning a practice, about kind of all the challenges that come with that. So as I graduated, I started my first job as an optometrist in a private practice, and I learned how to take care of patients, how to spend that time in the exam room, but I didn't find I learned anything about owning a practice, and I wasn't thinking I was going to during that time. So I started looking around and thinking the best way to learn is by doing. So I jumped in, found a practice for sale. I took a chance on it. I feel like it was a bit of a risk because I had a steady income, that I had been making for a year and a half, and buying a practice was a total variable. I didn't know if I would make more, less, nothing, and so I kind of took a chance by buying that practice and figuring it out as I go. And I think that's led me on this journey of learning to manage people, manage a practice, kind of all aspects of it that kind of got me to then buy a second practice and continue, I guess, that growth of the empire that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think you say you took a risk. Tell me a little bit about it's easy to say, but help me walk through the emotions that you felt through this, right? Because I think a lot of people feel those emotions, but you said, well, I'm going to move forward. So talk to me about the emotional side, the churn that it was to. Let's start off with the first one. When you had to leave a steady job. I'm sure. Did you have school loans too?
I do, yeah. I still do.
You still do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but you took you want to take a risk business. So that's a lot, right? And so share with us like kind of the emotional side of that.
Yeah. So it's definitely emotional I started working. I did love the practice I was in. I loved the patients I was with. And so knowing I was going to be walking away from that lifestyle, and, you go home from work after seeing patients as an employed optometrist, and you don't think about work. You maybe think about your patients, you think about tough cases you've had, and you think about, oh, should I have them back for testing? But you don't think about payroll and staff and rent. And so the emotional side of choosing almost to want more out of optometry, I kind of maybe got a little stagnant in just the patient care side of things, where I was loving that, but I wanted something more out of optometry. Emotional. I think emotional. It's kind of a tough, it's a tough way to think, but there's definitely, pieces to your day to day that make you happy, and parts that you don't. And right now I'm really happy because I feel like I have both the patient care that I love and loved, and also business aspect of things where I also enjoy. So, spending kind of that split time between different tasks as an owner optometrist has been really nice. I feel like, yeah.
Why do you think you made that choice? What drove you to get your first practice? And Also, what drove you for the second one after the first one?
Yeah. So the first one, what really drove me for the first one was the concept that I would never really be ready for it. And so I've talked to a lot of colleagues and friends and classmates who I encourage to think about owning a practice, and they're um, they're just not ready for the risk. They're not ready for the stability. They like the stability. Um, it's hard to say why, what really made me jump into it. I think I would have gone 5 years practicing and still not been any better at owning a practice. And so in my mind, I was like, there's really no benefit. I didn't find any benefit to waiting longer to buy a practice. And I'd always kind of known in the back of my head that I wanted to own my practice, a practice one day. I wanted to own it so that I could, have control of my own life, be my own boss. Think about, if we want to get a new piece of equipment, that's on me, not to convince an owner that they need to invest in a topographer for, keratoconus. I wanted to kind of have control of my own future. And I didn't think that I was going to get any better at owning a practice by being somebody's associate. I thought that actually doing it and learning it would be the only way for me to really get good at it. Although there were many, positives and many negatives, successes, failures over the course of, it's been 2.5 years now, since the first one. And so I found that kind of getting my feet wet and starting was the way to learn.
Yeah.
Now, the second location, kind of came about in a great way, where the practice that I took over the first one was an owner that I had found her through a broker. So I had found that she was selling. We met up. I liked the practice, pulled the trigger. She had 2 locations. So fast forward 2 years, she's ready to sell her second location. So I was able to, when she was ready to sell the second location, she reached out to me and said, "Hey, I don't know if you're interested, but I'm wanting to sell my other location. Here's the books, come take a look at it." We had stayed in touch over the 2 years. So she kind of felt like a friend. She was a friend, and she is now. But it kind of led me, it was the opportunity. It presented itself, and it looked to, it was a good opportunity. I like the staff. I like the location. And so it was a good fit.
So I like the story of how you came about the 2 locations. And I gotta ask a question. You have that drive to find one, and you got 2. Is there a drive for a third and beyond?
That's a good question. I feel like finding the 2 that I found, I've loved owning them. I feel like if the right third one came along, I would be open to it. I
Okay.
think the decision sort of for what I really valued out of the 2 that I found was the potential for growth. They were performing well, but I thought that with some updates, new staff, some new insurance protocols, things that really help kind of update the practice, I was able to grow them well, which has been really phenomenal. So I think with the right practice, at the right price, in the right place, I would be open to it. Right now, I'm about 6 months into my second location.
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
feel like for the meantime, I'm not looking, but just trying to keep the ones that I have running. And I'm actually in the process of hiring a new optometrist. So that's, a task that has been fun interviewing and talking to, but probably I could see it happening. I could see it happening.
Okay. I'll ask you again in a year or 2 if maybe
Yeah,
it'll change.
deal.
Um,
Yeah.
what are something you ran into when you went from 1 to 2 that you didn't expect?
Yeah. So when you have one practice, you're there every day. It's your only practice. It's your only place to be. Every issue that comes up, you're there to handle it. And when you have 2 locations, you can't be in 2 places at once.
Mm.
So issues come up in one or the other, depending on where you are, and you're not really there to handle them. And so things don't necessarily happen the way you would do it. If a certain patient didn't like their frame, or they wanted to, get a refund for some reason. And, there are all these kinds of problems that come up from patients to staff. And those, when you're on the ground there, it's easy to handle, or you can handle it. When you're not there, you have to rely on somebody else to handle that. So one solution I found, was I had a phenomenal office manager, and she's helped me greatly. I actually 2 phenomenal office managers. One, they were both with me in Back Bay first, which is the first location. And then when we got the second one, I pulled one of them to that new location to really help kind of be my eyes on the ground and helping, with the staff there to get them up to speed on how we do things in the Back Bay location. And so that's been a big help, I would say, for kind of having staff you can trust, and they report back to you. And, I do spend time in both locations, face-to-face time with each, staff member, and I see patients in both. So I get a little bit of insight, but I would say that's probably a challenge going from 1 to 2, was not being able to be 2 places at once.
Yeah, not giving up some of that control, I imagine.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, it's tell me about your team. Is it how do you structure it to where you're able to, well, maybe it's a problem that's still in progress. Like how do you make sure the offices perform like you want to? Patients are gaining experience like you want when you're not there.
Yeah, it's a good question. I really, I have a great team. I have an office manager in each location right now, and they double as opticians. So they're able to kind of sell glasses, spend time with patients, deal with any issues that come up, whether I'm there or not. And over the 2 years working with both of those two people, they've learned how I handle things. And so often things will get handled without me, but they'll take, so they'll kind of take ownership of things, and they'll let me know, hey, this such and such happened. Here's what we did. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. Great work. The rest of the team, we have, 2 front desk staff at each location that are phenomenal with answering calls and managing check-ins, check-outs. Really, I find that an emphasis I've put on the practice and the patient experience. I really want, from start to finish, patients to feel like they're cared for, like they're, respected. They're not just a number. They're coming in here. They're greeted with a friendly, welcome. How can I help you? Through the checkout process with the glasses. I don't want them to feel like they're just trying to be sold, something that they don't need, or that the doctor rushed them through the exam. I want them to kind of walk out of that being like, wow, that was a great experience. From the time they call to make an appointment through walking out, maybe with a pair of glasses, or if they don't need one, without a pair of glasses.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a particular way you do that? Like, is there something that, like, is it, you focus on metrics, you have a meeting, you have certain way to do it? How do you actually deliver that? Because it gets hard when you're there all day. You can do it because you got your ear to the ground. How does it work now that you're not in one place? What do you do? How do you train people to think like you want them to think? What's that? Yeah. What is that you use to do that?
It's a good question. There are some metrics that we look at. We get reviews. We text patients for reviews every day after they see one of their doctors, and we kind of rely on those to see, how are we doing? And we get mostly good, some mid, and some poor ones. It's part of the game, but we can use those as feedback and know kind of, hey, this person didn't have a great experience because of X. Let's talk about why that happened. How can we avoid that next time? So I guess kind of when things come up that are not kind of how we want them to be, I like to sit down with the staff. I bring them into my room and we chat and we say, hey, here's kind of the expectations for what I want out of that patient interaction, and here's what I'm seeing. And so we have to kind of get from A to B, and make sure that everyone on the team in both offices does that. Now, do I miss things because I'm not there? Probably. I hope that it's not too often, and if it is, I hope I'm made aware of it by one of my office managers, or unfortunately, sometimes a review that I can then address later.
Yeah. Interesting. How do you hire the right person? Because I think that's also a big thing. If I think a lot of times, and I did this too when we had one office and we had multiple.
Yeah.
One of the things that I did was, I was like, you know what? I really need someone right now, and they're good enough. I know they have these yellow flags or red flags. Like, how they say it's like they say they don't like to change the way they do things, but I think I can change it, right? Or whatever it might be, something silly like that.
Totally.
How do you, now, one, I'm assuming, did you go through that phase when you had your one location? And if you did, how did you overcome that? or how do you overcome something like that in terms of hiring? Like, what are your hiring practices?
Yeah.
Wait for the right one, or yeah, how do you
So
work?
I guess this will tie back into, I think, one of the earlier things I mentioned about buying that first practice and the risks. And I adopted a staff there that had already worked for another doctor, and they weren't necessarily ready, for what I was wanting to do with the practice. And so there was some turnover. None of the staff that was there when I took over is actually still currently there. So we had to hire everyone new, and we went through some I hired and they didn't work out. In the hiring process, which it's not easy. You post a job on Indeed or anywhere. You might
Yeah,
get 50 candidates for a front desk position. Go to interview them, and 10 don't show up. And then of the 40 that do, none of them are qualified. And so it's tough. I found that actually hiring for reception and technician kind of roles is not easy, because you get a different person in an interview than you actually get as an employee. Has been kind of one of the challenges I faced. And so overcoming it is still a challenge. I'm still in the process. I feel like the staff I have in Boston is phenomenal. The staff I have in Weymouth is phenomenal right now. But trying to figure out, we're hiring, kind of constantly for different roles, and
yeah,
vetting. I guess calling references was really nice for the last one. I asked for references, and I called them all, and I talked to their previous employers to see, do you have a good
yeah.
relationship with them still? Why did they leave? What were they like when they worked for you? And if they don't have good things to say, or if they have minimal to say, I found that may not be the best sign. If they really hype them up, that's usually a pretty good indicator that that's why they maybe they outgrew the position that they were in, and they didn't have a growth
Hmm.
path at their current location. They still could be a good fit for me. But yeah, I think, interviews, conversations, and references would probably be the three things I would kind of lean on for the next hire for the most.
I
Yeah.
I'll let go of the references.
Yeah.
Like, I can tell you how many times, like, this person's great, interview went well, they passed all of our assessments, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, just need one more thing. I need 3 references, at least 2 of them former bosses.
Yeah.
Um, I was about to hire a candidate who was like gonna be like a manager position. But I was like, okay, you gave me 3, but they gave me 5 eventually. But I was like, the first 3, I was like, no, these are bosses.
Yeah.
The second 2 are bosses. One never called me back, and the other one's like, you should know a couple things. So,
There.
and about the rehirability or not rehirability, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't like terrible, but I was like, okay, well, yeah, it's kind of. I was like, yeah, fortunately, I don't know if it's gonna be a good. I was like, hey, this is what
Yeah. Yeah.
we expect from you, and I don't know if it's gonna work, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean,
Well, I didn't even say that. I was just like, okay, well, they knew that what they were gonna say, the references, because they talked to them. They even told me that.
yeah.
But then I was like, look, this is what the job requires. If this is not what you need or want, I get it. But I want you to know this going into it. So it was helpful to avoid that situation, because it could have been 6, 7, 8, 9 months together.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have been happy. We wouldn't have been happy.
No, you need the right
I
fit.
wasted time.
Yeah. On
Yeah.
both sides.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so on that note, cost of staff is going up
Mhm.
quite a bit. How do you all deal with that? How you dealing with it well, or how do you help combat that at all? Or
Yeah. I think the way I've maybe approached dealing with it is paying it. When you have a really good employee that is doing the job that you need done correctly, and you trust them, then you pay them more, and that cost of the employee is higher. But I think the return I get from happy staff that is happy about their compensation, happy about their work environment, is more important to me than the costs maybe of having. Well, first of all, the cost of trying to hire somebody new, because I can't pay them a
yeah,
higher wage, and secondly, them being unhappy. So I found that really uh, it's a challenge, because you have, keep a business afloat, and you need to, try to make a little money at the end. And as that cost goes up, then, it cuts into that a little bit. But at the end of the day, really, I'm just, paying kind of the market rate. And then if they're really doing well, you get bonuses and pay them more.
well, I know that the rule of thumb again, I think it's changed now, but back a few years ago, it was 24%. You wanted to be about all in for non-doctor staffing,
Yeah.
24% of revenue. Do you find that you're still able to do that, or do you find that you pay more, but you end up getting more production, or you say like, hey, we're just going to take a lower margin because it's worth more to me to have that peace of mind, and versus having a better profit margin?
Yeah. I kind of wish I had better insight into this right now. My books, I feel like when I look at, the numbers, the revenue, it's a bit of a moving target where we'll have really phenomenal months and then we'll have months that aren't so great. And so that staff cost is going up as we grow. I would say if I had to guess, we're about 20, probably about 25 or 26%, but it depends on the month. When we have really high revenue months from the same staff, that's down versus when you have, lower revenue months, that percentage goes up. Yeah. So I think we've been on quite a growth trajectory. One of the Boston practice is growing at almost 40% year over year. And so, and the staff cost is not growing 40%. So
So I think you kind of answered the question, right? Like revenue's increasing. So you're not worried about the staff cost at this point. If revenues are steady, you had a mature practice, increasing 5-10% a year at most.
Yeah.
Then it might be a little tougher decision for you. Right now you're in growth mode.
Growth mode. Yeah. And so I'm not thinking as much about that from a cost perspective, more having happy patients that refer their friends and family. And if the staff costs a little more, fine by me.
So be it.
Yeah.
I honestly, quite frankly, I think that's kind of strategy we've taken in our offices too. Is like, look, we want a great wow patient experience in the office.
Yeah.
Now, do we deliver that every time? We try.
You try.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
You do the best you can. You do the best you can, and then at the end of the day, some people just are really tough to make happy. You find patients that they're gonna walk out of maybe any place a little unhappy, and I try not to lose sleep over those ones.
Fair enough. So let's want to shift gears just a little bit.
Sure.
And want to see what kind of makes you tick, like what makes Zach. Share with me a story that any point in your life, right? Any point in your life that you felt was formative to who you are as a person.
Okay. So right off the bat, at any point in my life, you made me think back to my whole life, and there was a moment when I must have been 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old. And I don't know if have you been to Boston?
Oh, yeah.
You've spent some time in Boston.
I like a few weeks here and there, like vacations. Right?
Okay, cool. So you know a little bit about the city. On the 4th of July, there's a big fireworks display on the Charles River. And every year, my family, we had a little boat we would take out onto the Charles River. We'd watch the fireworks from there. And I remember when I was about 10 years old, I was kind of bored on the boat. We had a little dinghy in the back, like an inflatable. And I got in the dinghy and I started driving around to other boats. And I asked them, do you have any trash you want to throw away? I'll take trash bags for $1 a bag and I'll take it for you so you can get it off your boat. Because all these thousands of boats on the river here, trash has got to go somewhere, right? And I knew that there was a dump right over there at the dock, but they couldn't get from the boat to the dock. So I spent like 5 hours driving around all day. I filled up the tank in the dinghy a couple times with gas, and I filled up my boat. I dropped all the trash off, and I probably made a couple $100, which when you're 10 or 11 years old, a lot of money. And I think that story sticks with me a little bit as I think about the business side of things, where I'm like, you know what? That's kind of who I was. I was like, oh, how can I see a potential problem, let's solve it, and kind of think about that business side. I think the entrepreneurial bone was there a little bit, even as a kid. And all along my life, I've always kind of had little things like that. I would, little businesses I would try to start, or, lemonade stand kind of stuff. So, I think that kind of, from a business perspective, might speak a little bit about me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's I've talked to people. So I've met two types of entrepreneurs. Folks who seem like they came out of the womb as an entrepreneur, like yourself, and then folks who over time developed the gene. And it's interesting. You see, it goes one or two ways, right?
Yeah,
it's just very different mindsets.
Yeah.
Probably why you wanted to have your own practice from the get go. You're like, no, I'm not doing this.
I want to. Yeah, totally.
So let me ask you this. So you seem to be, you have that knack for those opportunities. What do you see as opportunities in the optometry space right now?
Opportunity as a whole. So I'm actually on the legislative committee for the
Mhm.
Massachusetts Society of Optometry, or I'm joining the committee. I was
Yeah.
in the most recent meeting. I haven't.
Depending on when this releases, it
Yeah, yeah.
might be a full-time member. Yeah.
We'll see. But I've been in touch with the legislative committee. I've been on a couple
Yeah.
meetings with them, and I think that scope expansion is
Mhm.
kind of the next step within optometry. Um, right now with ophthalmology, there's fewer and fewer ophthalmologists, I feel, able to provide care for special sort of specialties like glaucoma. And I can see a window where optometry can kind of fill that gap. Um, procedures like SLT, maybe YAG, capsulotomies, kind of, expand our medical scope a little bit. Um, that's more of a legislative, thing going
Mhm.
forward, but it's something that we'll incorporate into private practice and provide care for patients. And I know my practice in Boston, I'm fortunate enough to be in a major city where I have Mass Eye and Ear, MGH. I have probably 15 ophthalmologists within throwing distance almost, it feels like. So when I
Yeah.
need something done in Boston, I have access to it. But I think optometry going forward, just in rural environments, really, in suburban as well, but more rural, they don't have access to care that patients don't. And it means that a cataract surgery might be a year wait list, or you need a glaucoma consults. Well, that patient might be losing vision as you're trying to get them in to see someone for a procedure. So I see, opportunities in optometry to further our medical scope of practice, and a little bit in the aesthetics world. I have an IPL in the practice, so I treat dry eye with that
Mhm.
rosacea, inflammation. But the cap,
I know it's state to state difference, what you can say you do with it and what you can't.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah, we have one too.
you
Yeah.
have one too, yeah, yeah. I mean, you can treat dry eye. You can
Yeah.
definitely treat dry eye. You can't really. I mean, I don't treat. I don't do aesthetics in my office. I just treat dry eye. But rosacea,
Has side
yeah,
effects.
the
Yeah.
side effects are nice.
Side
But
effects.
yeah,
Yeah.
they don't mind the aging.
I don't mind
Yeah,
that.
the fine lines and wrinkles and the age spots. So, but I think that actually giving optometrists an ability to potentially do some of those aesthetics procedures that are
Mm.
for the purpose of aesthetics would benefit the patient. We have the equipment, we have the capability, I think, to learn enough to treat the skin the same way an esthetician would. So I feel like that could be a potential opportunity for future kind of growth as a practice. I mean, as a profession.
Yeah, I think that seems to be what I'm hearing from a lot of other ODs as well.
Yeah.
It's like scope of practice and expansion into maximizing what we can currently do, depending on your state. I think I was talking to someone in Wyoming. Yeah, Wyoming, and they're like, "Yeah, we can do everything." I was like, "'Cause there's no doctors there, right?" So their scope is huge.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, that's pretty cool." So I guess it is state by state
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
regulations.
So I'm more thinking about
Well,
Massachusetts, but
yeah,
in general, yeah, totally.
okay. So what's let's go back a little bit.
Sure.
4 days after you graduate OD school,
Mhm.
what's the advice you'd give to your younger self?
4 days after I graduated OD school. So, it's a tough one. I feel like I've loved the path I've taken. Um, I don't regret anything, from then. So if I'm giving myself advice, I would tell myself to be confident,
Mm.
you know what you're doing as an optometrist, you know how to diagnose, you're not going to miss a retinal detachment. You know how to take care of patients. Be confident, go out and put the patient first.
Yeah.
That's the number one priority. Everything else will follow. If you think about what benefits the patients when they come in your door, then you'll be a successful optometrist. And I feel like I've done that. I try my best every day to, think about the patients first and how does that affect my business. It doesn't really matter how it affects my business. It matters that the patient is taken care of, and
Yeah.
then the business comes second. And if you put that first, I find the business has been successful so far. So, um, yeah, that's a good question, but I don't know if I wouldn't say I would change anything from what I've
Okay.
done. 4 days out to today,
Yeah.
3.5 years, 4 years later, I don't feel like there's much I would change in my career.
Yeah, you're still relatively. Some folks we talk to have been out for like 10, 20
Yeah.
years, and so you're still relatively new, which is really exciting. It was really impressive, by the way. It's really
Thank you.
awesome that you're able to already have 2 locations a couple years out with all the school debt that you had when you had going through it, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it really is. I think you might be underselling how difficult that is for a lot of people. So
That's actually another
you know,
thing, I would say. I think that people fear debt a lot, and
mm,
I don't fear debt at all. I don't think debt's a bad thing. I think debt is an asset. I view depending on the debt, you know, credit card debt, get out of credit card debt. But I've gone into debt as to be a student, to buy a one practice, to buy a second practice. It's all debt that returns more than the debt it costs in the first place. I think that's something people don't realize. I see a lot of optometrists that want to go like take a 3-year contract that this VSP office will pay off their entire debt in 3 years and they'll be debt free. And it's like, if that's the right fit for you, I support you, but you have a degree that has a lot of earning potential. That is good debt, in my opinion. And so I would encourage taking on, well, I took on more debt, and I'll probably take on more debt with new practices in the future and, you know, different business ideas. Who knows?
it's that initial key factor for success for you, right? The risk that you decided to
The risk.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
you're right. It's like a house, right? It's like, okay, well, you're taking debt to buy a house, but it's ideally
Yeah.
price go up and you have an
Yeah.
asset, appreciating asset.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Appreciating asset. Yeah. And I think the practices are too. I
Yeah.
mean, if you continue to grow them and, you know, they have an inherent value. Not that I ever intend to sell them. I'll probably keep them forever.
Yeah.
Pass them on to hopefully a kid someday.
Yeah. That sounds awesome. And if nothing else, they're usually more valuable, especially until you get much larger. They're usually more valuable as a cash flow, right? As a
Yeah.
1Z,
Yeah.
2Z, 3, even like 5 or 6, depending on your market,
Yeah.
it's more valuable to keep as cash flow versus an asset to sell because of the returns and multiple.
Returns.
Yeah, that's obviously different by market and timing and who's in the market to buy, but it's interesting. But
Totally.
cool. Well, Zach, this is awesome. Where can people find you if they want to connect? If they want to talk about like, hey, should I buy this practice or not? Or whatever you're willing to reach out and talk to people about. Where can people find you?
Oh, of course. So I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to add me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to accept and message through there. Also, I'll put up my email if anyone wants to shoot me an email. My email is Zachary Jost, od@gmail.com. So that's ZACHARYJOSTOD@gmail.com. Happy to help anyone else who's thinking about buying a practice and struggling, or who just wants to chat about optometry in general.
Yeah. We do have some students or recent grads that listen too, so I think that might be helpful for someone who's so close to out of practice, out of school to talk to as well. So we'll put
Sure.
we'll put your contact information in the show notes for folks.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Love to connect.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Jost, for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's really fun.
Yeah, this is good. And thank you, audience, for listening. If you learned something, laughed, and enjoyed it, please subscribe and share the podcast or YouTube video with your friends and colleagues. And thank you again, Dr. Jost. This has been another exciting episode of Optometrists Building Empires. We'll see you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Optometrists Building Empires. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, visit buildingempires.live. This show is proudly sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team was born out of staffing challenges my wife and I faced together, managing multiple optometry locations. We refined our approach at Classic Vision Care and now offer our expertise to others. If you're experiencing challenges with staffing and you'd like to set up a discovery call, we'd be happy to help you and connect you with the right resources. We'll see you next time.